Thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. The topic of conversation is the evolution of OTC markets. Clearly a very topical and interesting discussion, especially over the past events over the last year. I'd like to take a minute just to introduce my guest over here. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Josh. My name is Konstantin Shulga. I'm the CEO of Finery Markets. We are the largest industry ECN and the leading technology provider for OTC trading for brokers, banks, custodians, and OTC desks.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Konstantin. I think a good place to kick us off is just to set the scene for our audience and have a look back in time and consider the evolution of OTC markets in traditional markets. And I'd like to understand from your perspective, how do you define OTC and how do you think it might differ when you're looking at traditional exchanges, for example?
So actually, funny enough, in crypto, we're all used to the fact that exchange is way more than just an exchange. And it's most oftenly a broker, an exchange, a custodian, and like a mix of all the different things. But to simplify, an exchange is basically determining the set of rules for a buyer and a seller, for a client and the liquidity provider in terms of the trading, settlement, and just standardizing the terms. While on the OTC side, this is a bilateral relationship between a client and a counterparty or a client and a liquidity provider. But if we talk about the execution, the exchange side of things, most oftenly it's a firm orders sitting in the central limit order book, while on the OTC side, we have way more different flavors to the OTC relationship. It may be just a voice trade or a manual trade, as if we agree to sell Bitcoin. Like if I sell it to you at 30K right now, that might be considered just as an OTC trade. And with some retail broker navigating client flows to some OTC liquidity provider via API, this is also an OTC transaction. So right now we see a lot more demand, especially post-FTX, towards just new institutional grade OTC infrastructure. And we'll try to share more insights about that today.
Thank you so much. I'm just quite curious. We have seen quite a success of OTC markets and services within traditional finance. So what I'd like to understand from your perspective is, what do you think drove that success in traditional markets?
So to give this some context, my background is TradFi. I was doing that for the last 15 years and was lucky enough to build electronic trading products across equities, FX, and fixed income. And what really unites these asset classes is that a lot of the trading is done OTC, but in different ways. So today I wanted to share a few examples. Let's start with the FX market, which historically was dominated by OTC market players. And like this graph that you see on the screen, this is a very simplified version of the OTC execution landscape in crypto, which might look a little complex. But this is, once again, a simplified version provided by Bank of International Settlements with a few leading players around the dealers, the banks that were acting as the main liquidity providers to the space. But especially due to the electronification of the trading, we started to see the multi-dealer platforms, ECNs, single dealer platforms, all competing for the client demand, especially with best execution regulation. Well, probably not so much on the FX, but mainly on the equity space. And that what really resulted in a very fragmented and a complex market structure. And if we talk about equities, you might probably be a little surprised to know that over the last 20 years, the share of OTC trading for US equities went from around 10% to almost 50%. So imagine right now if you're buying an Apple stock or a Facebook stock, which is now Meta, through your online broker, the chances are in 50% of the cases, the trade will be executed off exchange. And the reasoning for that and like why is that happened, I think there are three main pillars. First of all, it's the technology, the electronification of the markets, the regulation, the best execution regulation that really was driving this competition across different venues, across different systematic internalizers or ATSs or like ECNs or any other OTC solutions, that actually resulted in the growing share of OTC transaction. Because whenever this is fragmentation, OTC provides with quite efficient way of interacting, and now we have almost 50% of all the US markets trading OTC. I guess that's probably why we have like NASDAQ that targets 50% of all of their revenue coming from SaaS solutions. So they want to power the technology behind that, not just be the execution venue.
Thank you so much. I think that's some great context and something that we can use to move on to the crypto market specifically. Now, you mentioned 3 pillars when you're discussing the success that we've seen in traditional markets. Do you believe that that same level of success can be emulated within crypto, and why do you think so?
Well, first of all, I'm quite biased on this one because we literally run an OTC product and technology. But if we talk about the actual trends in the space, we see this probably level of debundling that's right now happening in the crypto space. And the major trends that determine the industry right now, the institutional demand that's coming for the last probably like couple of years, and it's going to be even like more so. It requires a completely different level of OTC infrastructure, debundled solutions, and I think that will really determine the way the market evolves in the next 12 or 24 months, especially with the regulation. So I see that the regulatory landscape, the client demand, that's what's driving the markets towards the OTC right now.
Yeah, I think we can all see that there is a growing institutionalization within the marketplace, especially post FTX, with regulatory clarity starting to come out. What types of shifts within the market structure do you envision coming off the back of this institutionalization, and how is OTC positioned to take advantage of that?
So to kind of reiterate my point, I think that the word that will determine the next couple of years of the crypto markets evolution will be the debundling. So separating different services and actually allowing institutional grade players to have institutional grade liquidity providers and solutions. So if we talk about like exchange trading and OTC trading, I think the most popular landscape right now will be the multilateral OTC relationship. We did a study together with PwC last year on OTC trading, and we discovered that on average, any B2B client has at least 5 different relationships with 5 different liquidity providers or venues. For certain players, it's even more than 10. That's what's really determining the need of the infrastructure and different solutions on the market. Because if you are dealing with 5 different LPs, you need to have like the execution venue, not necessarily an exchange, but there might be a new class of ECNs or multi-dealer platforms or like smart order routers that are appearing out there. But it's not only about execution. We'll see the debundling with separation of custody and clearing services. So instead of facing just a one-stop shop, you will most probably have a proper regulated custodian, a proper venue where you can make sure that you're actually getting the best execution for your clients and yourselves. And you will probably use a clearing broker in order to clear across different venues and different liquidity providers. Additionally to that, we'll also have like the banking rails, because in the crypto or like in FX, you don't need to have like a real separation of a banking partner and like a custody. While in crypto, you still have the fiat leg. You need to settle in dollars, euros, like Aussies and any other fiats, and also the financing. So I think that these different services and the institutional grade infrastructure will actually shape the market, and we'll see some new names coming into the space, disrupting the existing players in order to provide just a more robust and reliable infrastructure.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that there is likely to be a debundling taking place, especially since post-FTX. I think a lot of lessons have been learned by the industry. When you talk about the fragmentation, a lot of people might consider that as a diversification when you're looking at different providers. But when you consider the OTC markets, clearly there is a mitigation of counterparty risk taking place there anyway. So do you mind just elaborating on how you believe OTC minimizes those risks and maybe what benefits that brings to investors?
For sure. And I think FTX was actually a wake-up call for most of the industry players, especially like the crypto native ones. Because if you're coming, like myself, I'm coming from traditional space. And I remember 10 years ago, was sitting on a desk and we were building our DMA offering on top of the Knight Capital for US equities, providing our clients access to US equities via Knight Capital. And luckily, we had a backup broker. So all of a sudden, I just remember getting a message from my my coverage team at Knight and saying that we're sorry, we're like shutting down all the pipes. And what really happened is that I guess to those that don't remember the story, like they deployed the market making algo into production, what actually meant to be deployed into test, and in a couple of hours they lost 400 million, which resulted in complete loss of business. So these things happen. And one of the main insights for me when I was sitting and trying to unwind the positions and kind of do switch on all of our backup pipes is that you need to have a proper diversification. You need to not to take like sufficient counterparty risks, even for the largest industry players. And I think the landscape that you see on the slide, like with a proper debundling, that definitely addresses the need of all the institutional clients coming into the space. And there are not a lot of players like that in the crypto that do the proper debundling, so I'm pretty bullish on some of the proper regulated custodians in the space, like the PBs, like the multi-dealer venues, ECNs, what we're trying to do in Finery markets on the execution side as well.
You mentioned regulation in your answer, and I think that is clearly becoming extremely topical. We obviously understand the lessons that need to be learned post-FTX, and I think there has been a move towards comprehensive digital asset policy when you look at jurisdictions such as the UK, the UAE, the EU, for example. How do you envision those regulatory changes, those notable digital asset policies impacting the market structure? Do you feel it could be a further catalyst for demand in terms of overall adoption and perhaps maybe on the institutional front as well?
So what I see is that the crypto as an asset class is quite unique due to its fragmentation. And once again, if you look at this slide, this is only like an off-chain market structure, but there's a whole new dimension on the on-chain space with like the oracles, what makes probably the most complex asset class and the most complex infrastructure that the humanity ever created. And in order to navigate this infrastructure from the regulatory perspective is also quite challenging. So what it creates like hundreds of different fragmented liquidity pools. Even so, like Bitcoin itself is fully fungible, right? You can trade Bitcoin in the US, in the UK, like in Asia, and that will be quite the same coin. While liquidity can be separated due to the local regulation, due to the local like just central limit order books. So I know that a lot of regional exchanges are struggling with liquidity provision just because by law they need to maintain a separated framework for their like execution custody. So I think this is also a way for the OTC market to help and solve this fragmentation issue. And another point on the regulation, I think the best execution, especially with MiCA, will also shift the landscape for a lot of brokers and a lot of kind of client-facing institutions. So we'll need to be more efficient in the way they provide and achieve best execution.
I think when people look at the OTC market and take it for face value, I think there is a lot of opaqueness that does exist in the industry. I think when we consider the regulatory changes that might be coming into effect, there is likely to be provisions for enhanced transparency, potentially. Antithetically, blockchain technology is known for its transparency, and yet there are certain segments of the market that don't provide that same level of transparency. So I guess what I'd like to understand from your perspective is, do you feel that this opaqueness within OTC is actually by design, and what do you think can be done to enhance transparency?
That's actually like a point of us having this discussion right now today, because historically, even the exchange trading space was not that transparent. Like, there's still a lot of wash trading happening on some tier 2, tier 3 exchanges. Even on the large ones, we still have a lot of like this wash trading flow, which makes it not extremely transparent to actually identify the size of the market. But when you talk about the OTC, there's no data about the OTC transactions. You can analyze the on-chain settlements, but that really doesn't give you a way to analyze the trading flows. So what we actually decided to do is we decided to become the source of such information. So partnering with CCData, right now we're running a research, and actually, you can sign up for the research on the OTC data and some of the insights. We want to measure the size of the market. We want to identify like what are the main pain points in the industry. So if you are interested, you can sign up for the report, which should be released within the next few weeks. And I think this is quite important for the industry, because in equities, there's off-exchange trade reporting mechanism. In FX, there's also like a Bank of International Settlements doing this kind of consolidation of data for the OTC, but there's nothing in crypto yet. And I think maybe with your help participating in the survey and actually signing for the report, we'll be able to spread the word and make it maybe like not just an annual, but a quarterly report producing the proper data for all the institutional players in the space.
Yeah, I think improving transparency of the overall market size is definitely an ambitious task, but something that I feel is desperately needed. We have a lot of data within CCData when we look at centralized exchanges, for example, but there is a lot of data fragmentation and lack of data availability when it comes to OTC. So I think this is a very important initiative. Now, I think I'd like to move forward and consider the future. When we look ahead, there's clearly a lot of institutionalization. We've got the regulatory development and potential clarity coming through. What I'd like to understand from your perspective is, how do you feel OTC is likely to consider these changes moving forward? How is it likely to adapt? How do you envision changes to be made in terms of overall structure? And how do you see the space in about 5 years from now?
Well, it's the crypto is changing like very fast, but I think there are clearly beneficiaries of what's happening in the space right now. Like I mentioned, I think that custodians, the prime brokers, the OTC liquidity providers, and the ECNs, I think, will be able to shape the future of the next wave of institutional adoption in the crypto space. And of course, the lawyers, I mean, they always get the credit regardless of the market structure.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Konstantin. I think that was a really insightful panel, and I thank you for joining us. I hope everybody enjoyed the talk. And if there are any other questions, feel free to approach myself or Konstantin following the talk, and we're happy to have a chat.
Thanks a lot, Josh, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you.